a slow trust that reform might outlast fear. Gia stood with him, her scarred palm resting on the hilt of her blade, a silent vow that mercy could be strength as well as mercy's edge. Li Wei spoke of a plan that blended courage with compassion. Send a small expedition to retrieve the Lantern's map, but also begin a program of renewal schools, granaries, and open councils where citizens could speak their truth. They traveled under a moon-washed sky toward a temple that had long slept beside the Ember River, its stone walls breathing with age and weather. A temple gate loomed unsmiling, and beyond it, a chamber awaited the worthy. A guardian figure appeared quiet, patient, almost ancient in its patience, and offered 3 trials: clarity of mind, courage of body, and mercy of heart. The first trial, the Hall of Reflections, showed Li Wei 1,000 versions of himself, some bold, some frail, some cruel in the name of safety, others compassionate to a fault. He spoke to each image not to deny them, but to acknowledge their place in the whole of him, and thus he found a steady center that did not bend under pressure. The second trial, the Stare of Truth, pressed his lungs with the weight of choices past and present. He admitted missteps he would not hide, confessing that strength without empathy risks becoming the tyranny of necessity. As the weight dissolved into a soft glow of light, he learned to bear responsibility with a calmer breath. The third trial, the Mercy Chamber, placed an innocent soul behind a veil of accusation. Gia's voice rose not in anger, but in clarity, demanding that justice be seen as it is, untarnished by fear. Li Wei stood with her, declaring that mercy is never a retreat from duty. It is the discipline to do right when wrong is easy. The lantern of quiet. Fire revealed itself at last, a lantern-shaped reliquary whose flame refused to burn with anger, but burned with a blue patience. Inside lay a scroll's map, and the temple's air hummed with the sense that power must be a discerning light, not a blind blaze. The lantern's map pointed inward as much as outward. A traitor in the palace, a whisper who wished to bend the throne to fear. The revelation did not come as a clang of swords, but as a careful, almost ghostly unraveling of loyalties, a careful tracing of who stood to gain from quiet chaos. The suspicion fell upon a trusted counselor, yet the evidence required not a fury, but a moral reckoning, public, transparent, and anchored in mercy. The Festival of Lanterns arrived, a turning point where the city's heart opened to the light and to truth. Li Wei did not announce vengeance. He invited the city to witness accountability. The traitor as exposure was met not with spectacle, but with a solemn ritual that bound the realm to a higher law. Truth spoken aloud, mercy offered openly, and the state reorganized under a renewed social contract. With the lantern's flame as a patient guide, reforms began in earnest. Schools opened their doors to every child. Rice and grain distribution found a more just balance, and guilds shared the gains of trade with laborers who had once been invisible in the city's ledger. Gia's blade remained a symbol of protection, but her role evolved into a bridge between the people and the council, ensuring that policy never outpaced the human need it was meant to serve. The temple scribe, keeper of old prayers and new laws, taught that memory and law must walk hand in hand. The prime minister learned that strength does not only compel, but persuades, and that mercy is a force multiplier when paired with accountability. In time, the Ember River's banks grew fertile with ideas as much as with crops, and the city learned to measure success not just in safety, but in shared dignity. Years passed like rivers bending toward a wider sea. Li Wei aged with a calm that came from listening to the city. As living memory, the grandmother who told of dragons, who slept beneath mountain roots, the apprentice who carved jade with patient hands, the street musician who tuned his instrument to the rhythms of rice harvests. Mei Lin, who had become his closest ally in governance, stood with him as a partner who could balance blunt practicality with a just imagination. At the heart of the court, a new sense of purpose arose: to weave policy with culture, science with compassion, and law with mercy. The lantern's glow did not fade. It brightened, a steady beacon that reminded the realm that protection without empathy is a hollow shield, while mercy without resolve is a dream without form. The canal networks thrummed with life and lessons. Friends and strangers met in markets where ideas flowed as freely as water. Philosophers debated, poets sang, and engineers whispered about bridges and locks that could serve not only trade but trust. Li Wei listened, and in listening learned that leadership is a form of listening, a practice of hearing what the people need and translating it into action that honors their humanity. Mei Lin's leadership, like a blade that never dulls, taught the city to defend the vulnerable and reward the willing. She led with a quiet courage that made power feel less like coercion and more like stewardship. The empire moved forward, not by conquering others, but by lifting its own citizens, educating, feeding, healing, and including. Hidden in a corner of the palace library lay a set of old scrolls, half forgotten by time, that spoke of governance beyond lines and ink of a kingdom where the governed were teachers and governors were learners. Li Wei, guided by Mei Lin and the temple scribe, began a practice of open councils, inviting voices from every walk of life to speak their truths before the city. It was not chaos but a chorus, and through it, policy found its moral shape. One night, under a moon bright as a coin, Li Wei and Mei Lin walked the garden paths and spoke of responsibility to future generations. They drafted the Moonlight Accord, a ceremonial pledge that bound the rulers and the people in shared duty: education for all, fair land distribution, and a judicial system that balanced accountability with compassion. The accord was not a mere document, but a living ritual, a yearly festival of learning, a canal feast, and a public forum where citizens could question power with courage and be answered with honesty. The elder advisor, once a soft voice of doubt within the council, returned not as a villain, but as a guide who had learned the danger of cynicism and the beauty of tempered ambition. He helped shape reforms that kept the state as machine from becoming overbearing, while preserving the human core that gives governance its heartbeat. The city, now a mosaic of cultures and trades, thrived because its rulers chose to blend strength with mercy, knowledge with empathy. A decade of steady rule bled into a new season of cultural flourishing. Li Wei spoke less in triumph and more in invitation, asking the city to dream together of higher futures. Schools for every child, gardens for every district, theaters for every street. The lanterns of Ember River shone with a patient glow, not to dazzle enemies, but to remind the citizens that the true power of a king lies in safeguarding the dignity of the many. The lanterns of Ember River did not vanish with the changing tides of time. They lingered as a memory and a practice, a symbol of governance where mercy and courage walk hand in hand, where truth is spoken openly, and where every voice, no matter how small, has a seat at the table of the realm. In this tale, a king's strength was not the weight of his scepter, but the brightness of his mercy, and a city's future was not decided by fear, but nurtured by trust.